Honor and pleasure to introduce to you someone who brings both heart and depth to the conversation on workplace well-being. She has worked with leaders and professionals across industries, creating spaces where people feel seen, supported, and inspired to thrive. With a unique blend of professional expertise and a deep understanding of human behavior, she helps organizations move beyond quick fixes to build truly flourishing workplaces. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Kelly Khan. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, James. And a very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Kelly, and thank you so much for being with all of us today. Now, let's be real. Leaders are stressed. And the question is really about how better can we resource them. In your line of work, whether you are L&D or HRs or even speakers, over the past few years, perhaps we have been seeing a lot of leaders juggling performance issues, people pressures, and of course, their own personal well-being as well. And of course, we know that when leaders struggle, it also cascades to the whole organization and the whole teams. Now, today, I want to be able to share with you a very practical and a science-backed framework that can give us a fresh idea on how we can approach leadership well-being. My hope is that it sparks new ideas for all of you so that you can actually see how we can better resource our leaders altogether. Now, we all want our leaders to flourish, right? So that's the area where we all want our leaders to be at, bringing their best, bring clarity, bring a lot of energy to the teams to be able to support one another, right? Without running on empty or without being burned out. Now, when leaders flourish, of course, we also see there's a ripple effect. Team morale improves, organization changes, the culture, engagement rises as well. But the reality is that leaders are not there. This is where leaders are at. A lot of them are not flourishing. And of course, we can also see data that tells us that as well. Now, according to the Global Leadership Forecast 2025, we can see that 71% of leaders reporting that, hey, they have higher stress since stepping into the role. So it's almost like a 3 out of 4 leaders who is reporting stress. Deloitte also tells us that 66% of managers and 71% of C-level executives would leave a job for a job that better supports their well-being. I believe that loyalty is really important, right? But we also recognize that sleep is also very important for all of us. And Gallup also tells us, you see, the impact also spreads very quickly because global employee engagement also fell from 23% to 21% just in 2024, largely due to the declining leadership engagement, costing the economy a lot of money, right? We are talking about 438 billion here, right, in lost productivity. Now, I don't just have data from all these management consultancy firms, but I also gathered my own data from working with different organizations. And the patterns are very similar. So the data includes both leaders and also employees as well, because stress affects not just leaders as well, right? It cascades down to employees and it cascades down to the whole organization. So let's take a look at some of these data. When I ask a group of people, what is causing stress in your life? And this is what came out again and again, that people are struggling with balancing work and life, right? There's a lot on their plates, right? Sometimes, they are always on and never really switch off. Now, if that's you, you ever heard of people saying that? Could you be typing in the chat, yes, you have heard of some leaders, or perhaps sometimes you yourself or people that you know are kind of trying to balance work and life. They kind of tell you that before, right? If you have heard of something like that, yep, big peak of burnout. Thank you, Sandrine. So there are also people, right, in these statistics that people are also overwhelmed by a lot of workload. There's just a lot in their plates. Someone has once told me before that, everything is so urgent. So if everything is so urgent, what do I do first? There is also unclear job expectations, and sometimes people do not really know what's expected of them, which thus adds to the stress and frustration as well. Right, and how did all this stress affect them? And that's where people actually did some voting, and they mentioned that there's a lot of lack of concentration, decrease in productivity. It leads to a lot of health issue, feeling overwhelmed, negativity, feeling worried as well. And when we dig a little bit deeper into these stresses, and here is literally what people say about them, right? So these are raw words, unfiltered words, real words that people actually say about their situation. And sometimes in the organization, they may not tell you openly. What do we hear? Why do I have to work on weekends? How many of us actually feel this way as well? Right? You can type that yes in the chat. I'm not sure, right? Sometimes we actually feel like, hey, why do I have to work on weekends? I don't get enough support from peers. It's tired sometimes to work late every day. We can see that there's a huge amount of workload people are facing with. People expect too much of me but don't know the reality. There's so much to do, but I'm already so stretched. I'm not good enough. They express it in different ways. And these are different people who say, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. Or sometimes they say things like, I'm just not enough at work. Now, if we listen closely, these are voices that we probably hear in almost every organization. So while this data reflects a mix of leaders and employees, but it also gives us a clear picture of the pressures that's really running through all these organizations, right? So that's where I see this leader well-being gap. We want our leaders to flourish, but leaders are not flourishing, right? So they are at this intersection of pressures where on one hand, they are trying to manage people's issue, they are managing their own KPI, but yet they are also trying to manage their own well-being as well. And that's where this huge gap arises, where I call this the leadership well-being gap. I'm a speaker, I am a workshop facilitator, trainer on workplace well-being, but I also bring the lens of a trained psychotherapist with a master's in counseling. Right? So the work I do blends practical workplace experiences with the science of human development. And in many, many different organizations, as we talk about this leader well-being gap, I do see that a lot of companies are trying to do a lot of different things. And I believe that these are very, very valuable to a certain extent, right? Because we run a lot of different well-being efforts from talks, wellness talks to leadership programs, and each one does bring a lot of value. But however, without a clear link between them, they sometimes can lead to fragments. They can be a little bit scattered because, when we are not able to connect to the whole big picture, all these fragments can actually lead to gaps. And that's one clear example that I want to share with you regarding these gaps, because these are some of the gaps I see. And one of the gaps is what I call this the awareness action gap. Do you see that, or rather in your work, do you also realize that a lot of times leaders will tell you that, hey, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but they're not doing it? Because sometimes they may lack the practical steps, the skill set, the habits to turn that into sustainable and consistent action. And we may also have this intent impact gap. So a lot of leaders mean well, but however, when it cascades down to the direct reports by the people that reporting to them, somehow it wasn't well received by others. And then leaders comes to me and say, hey, I think I've been doing a lot of things, but but why doesn't my team sees that? Now, another gap that we see perhaps is what we call the individual system gap. Now, most programs focus on individual resilience, isn't it? Individual responsibility. But a lot of times they don't really talk about, address the issues that led to those problems in the first place. And the last gap is short-term sustainable gap. Now, we may often rely on like a one-off wellness program or wellness talks, but at the end of the day, it does boost the people temporarily, in a temporal way, right? It's really helpful for that short moment, but at the end of the day, it may not build lasting and sustainable change. So when the efforts are all fragmented, what's really happening is that gaps emerge everywhere, and these gaps do add up. Now, when efforts are fragmented, gaps add up, what happens to leaders? And that's where you probably hear leaders saying that I'm so tired, I'm stuck, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not sure what to do. So we try to patch them up, but in the end, it may not receive the exact results that we really want. So people are fragmented. So the question is really about how then could we really piece all these fragments up so that leadership well-being becomes a functioning whole? Now, we are also not just talking about, leaders being able to function, because at the end of the day, they're just surviving, right? And we do not want our leaders to just survive. We want our leaders to thrive. We want our leaders to be able to flourish. And to be able to truly flourish, and that's where I have this framework called H.A.V.E. And it's really about building the internal and external resources that leaders need so that well-being isn't a one-off program, right? But is part of the way that the organization operates. So let's talk about this H.A.V.E. Working whole framework, because at the end of the day, at essence, it's really about unlocking sustainable performance through well-being. Now, every strong structure always starts with a solid foundation, right? And that means healing the cracks first. And in leadership, those cracks, what are those cracks? It could mean the hidden stress that people doesn't tell you. They don't tell you that. The workplace trauma that sometimes affects them. It could be the negative thoughts, like what you see in the earlier data where people think that I'm not good enough, right? Or it could be really competing demands. And that's where the first step of the framework is to really talk about healing the fragments, right? Because when we start to heal the fragments, the shifts can be really simple, but yet it can be really deeply meaningful. So here's an email, one of the part of the email that I received from a lawyer after a session, right? And it's as simple as, I'm really able to sleep well for the first time in 2 months. So I was saying that, yeah, sleep is really, really important, right? We are trying to heal the cracks, and sleep can be really foundational, but it's so deeply meaningful for a person, for a leader to be able to sleep well. So once the cracks are healed, and that's where the next step is talking about really, let's build the alignment from within, right? To reconnect leaders with the core values, with their motivations, with their strengths. Because when leaders are anchored internally, they can also lead with clarity and not just efforts, right? So imagine leaders really reconnect with their values, their own strength. And that's where something powerful really happens. They start to see themselves and their priorities more clearly, right? And this is also one of the reflection from a participant. And this person says, I uncover and learned more about myself, right? And my priorities to navigate different sets of challenges. So this is also where leaders stop running things on autopilot, which I believe a lot of us sometimes do as well, right? And start leading with intention. Now, the next step is talking about vitalizing systems. Leaders learn how to collaborate better, more intentionally with their teams. They start to build trust. They start to create places where people actually feel safe with one another. Now, when leaders are able to build that collaboration, that's where everything also shifts, right? There's lesser tensions and the whole environment changes for everybody. So this is how an engineer described, right, the experience after that. I really like the words he used because he mentioned those tensions shifted dramatically. I love this word. Creating a smoother, more harmonious environment. So that's also where culture starts to shift. It may not be dramatic sometimes, right? But it could really be, small shifts that we talk about one at a time. And that's where we can see a lot of great results. So imagine when leaders heal, they align, they start to vitalize the teams. The impact also doesn't stop there because it does expand. And the final step is really about elevating renewal, that we are able to lift the leadership impact and performance to create flourishing workplaces. Now, when leaders are able to do that, to create flourishing workplaces, right, to focus on their strength, we also see great results. And this is what a leader told us after one of the program. And this is one of the message that she sent to me previously, right? So now she's able to recognize the strengths of the team members, which make all of us effective and happy. I believe that's what a lot of us want to do as well, right? In the workplace, that all the team members are happy and working together well, and she's able to lead them more effectively. So here we go, right? This is a summary of the Working Whole framework for leaders and a quick overview of how the framework comes together in practice. Now, in this whole program, right, it can be structured in a modular manner, right? And we also do offer individual and group coaching sessions to deepen the change because we want it to be sustainable. It could be supported by micro practices so that leaders can apply immediately at work as well. Now, the goal is not to run a one-time event, right? It's not to run in fragments, but it's to create a sustainable journey so that leaders can go through this journey together, right? Blending reflection, blending learning, application, and culture building. And that's where we move from just nice ideas into lasting change for everybody. So leaders who have it, create workplaces where well-being fuels performance. Now, my invitation to all of you is simple, that let's build these workplaces from the inside out. If whatever I speak today resonates with you, let's connect. Right, let's connect on LinkedIn, because I think it's important, right? I just want to acknowledge all of us that, hey, thank you for all the work that you have done for your teams, for the leaders, right? Let's build a harmonious working environment together, and let's all transform leaders from the inside out. So let's connect, and thank you very much for today, for this participation. And yep, I'll hand over the time over to Hilmi, and if there's more questions for me and for all of us, please let me know as well. Thank you very much.